hand over to Craig, who is the host for today's session.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Maha. So yes, welcome to today. I'm very excited about today's topic. It's quite an important topic in that it's something that we often talk about, that there's not enough girls and young women in tech. And as I said in some of my posts on social media, we don't really want to focus on the problems today, but more so we want to focus on what some educators are doing to help solve that problem. If you're not aware, and I think if you're joining this call, you probably are, but just to make sure you are aware, Digital Extra Fund is a Scottish charity that supports extracurricular tech activities through an annual grant awards program. I won't get into that too much right now because that's not the point of this call, but I will mention that applications are currently open for grant awards for the 2023-2024 academic year. So you can apply for up to £5,000. And one of the aims of Digital Extra Fund and one of the questions in the application is we want activities to be able to be successful at engaging groups underrepresented in tech, and a big audience of that, big group for that is girls and young women. And so the question is, how can, in your application, but also in real life, how can we do that more? So today we've got a wonderful panel of 4 educators joining us who Maha and I have carefully handpicked because they run the gamut of experience, of ideas, let's just I'll do some quick introductions and then you'll get the idea. So first person I'm going to introduce is Karen-Ruth Phillips, who's a principal teacher in Angus and digital lead at her primary school. She was successful in her application last year to create a girls' STEM and robotics club at the school. And they used some equipment, which they purchased with the grant, including Vexco, Microbits, and Dash and Robots, as well as some activities on code.org. I've also got Tanya Howden on the call here today with us. She's a computing science teacher at Boroughmuir High School in Edinburgh. She's also formerly the digital program manager at Heart of Midlothian Football Club's Innovation Centre and learning experience designer for Robotical, which, if you're not familiar with Robotical, it's a little blue robot. While at Hearts, Tanya was supported by Digital Extra a few times, including a design an app to save the world course, which was delivered during the lockdown, the initial lockdown. And it was successful at engaging young people remotely. But she's been very passionate about computing science since her time in high school, where she was involved with Apps for Good, and that has led to her now soon to be a fully qualified computing science teacher. Another computing science teacher on the call, although she's taking a slight leave at the moment, is Tony Scullion, who's well known around these parts for her advocacy to get more young girls involved in tech. She was a teacher in West Lothian, a high school in West Lothian, but she's also founded the charity Dress Code, and she was a co-founder of the ada.scot festival. She's done a lot, which is difficult to list in a very quick synapse, but at the moment she's working on Stacks, which I'll let her maybe chat a little bit more about later. But basically, it's been in the news this past week. It's working to basically it's computing science teachers helping other computing science teachers do better at teaching in general and learning about the resources and supporting each other, but also how do we get more young people and girls and young women engaged. And then last but not least, we had a quick change on the panel at the last minute. So apologies if you're expecting Ruth, but we've got instead Dr. Amanda Ford, who's a lecturer at West College Scotland. She's got expertise in programming fundamentals, computer games, 2D and 3D animation, modeling. She's also a founder of the Scottish Games Education Network. She organizes an annual mini game jam and a coder dojo, and she was also 2018's Scotland and Women in Technology Champion in Education. So thank you all for joining us. We've also got Matthew Barr and Anna Doyle from Glasgow University and ada.scot, and we'll chat more about that in a bit. But first, I want to get into what we're here today to talk about, which is how do we get more girls and young women engaged in tech? Now, I've been doing this for 6 years at the Digital Extra Fund. Before that, I was at Edinburgh Science Festival. My colleague Maha, who you heard earlier, she's been with the fund for 2 years. Before that, she was at Aberdeen Science Centre. So we've spoke with loads of educators, and I think if there's one lesson that we've learned is that, unfortunately, there's no silver bullet that gets girls engaged in tech. Everybody's different, and so there's not one thing that we as funders or educators can do to get more girls interested in tech. However, certainly over the past 6 years, we've supported over 100 projects across the country, and I've spoken to dozens of educators about this topic and read loads of research about it. There are some themes, and so those are the themes that we're going to talk about today. And I've got some examples from those themes that the panel will be able to speak about. So I just want to get right into it. But the themes are community, creativity, collaboration, and competition. So nice little alliteration there, all C's, just make it a little bit easier to remember. And Maha, I don't know if you want to throw it up there in the chat, but we do have a Jamboard set up as well. And so we're going to talk about some of the ideas that our panel have used under those themes today. But what we'd like you to do as well is, if you have an idea that you want to throw in there, because we only have an hour, if you want to throw your idea up on the Jamboard, we're going to collate all that after this, and we're going to put together a PDF, and we'll make that available on our website. But the first thing I want to chat about is community. And what does that mean? Well, when I started speaking with the panel about this a couple weeks ago, I came at it from the angle of tech for good. A theme of creating a social benefit, helping people. It's not a coincidence that we see more girls and young women engaging with life sciences or teaching or nursing, because there is a social benefit there. And whether it's society or whatever, they are drawn to that. But that can be applied to tech very easily. However, through the conversations with the panel here today, I also realized that creating an actual community within your school, especially amongst girls and young women, can have a lot of benefits as well. We talk a little bit about that later on in positive peer pressure, but there's some ideas here that I wanted to explore. Now, there's a wealth of experience. So I'm going to go first to Tanya, because I mentioned it in your intro. You had a program called Create an App to Save the World. Do you want to tell the people here today a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So we came up with a plan for creating an app to save the world initially before the whole COVID situation. So it was all planned to be in person at Hearts Stadium, and the whole idea was looking at how can we use technology for doing something positive in the world. So a lot in the news, or a lot with parents that I speak to, there's a lot of chat about, oh, they spend so much time on their Xbox, they spend so much time in front of a screen, you know, why is that good for them? Why should they be interested in computing and spend even more time in front of a screen? And we kind of started to realize that it's not about being a consumer, but about being a creator, which is very different. So being able to create with technology is a totally different game changer compared to just consuming. So we were trying to look at the ways that we could use technology positively in the world and allow young people to start to think about, this is the world that they're going to be going into and that they're going to help to shape. So what could they do? So the idea was they had to come up with an app idea that solves a problem either in their own personal life, in their community, or in the world in another country. And we went through the kind of the whole life cycle of thinking about the problem, branching out a bit, thinking about the target audience, designing it, and then starting to code it. And in between all of those stages, we had people come in from industry where the groups would then pitch their ideas and get feedback. So they were starting to realize that technology wasn't just about maybe building the next best video game, or it wasn't just about, Word or spreadsheet that they might use in school, but they could actually do something that has a purpose and could help someone else in the world. Sorry, Craig, I don't know how much you want me to talk.
No, I was sorry. I realized I was on mute, so I had that panic where I was trying to get to the mute button fast enough. Thank you. No, that's brilliant. And I can attest to everything Tanya just said, because I actually got to attend one of the sessions with the young people, and they presented their apps to me. And I think my favorite one, I recall, was, it was actually a map that sort of mapped where all the bins were, so that you could, it was to encourage or not just young people, encourage everybody to make sure that they put their litter in a bin. It's such a simple idea, and yet I was thinking, this is absolutely something that I could use in my life. And that, again, it's amazing when some of these ideas come out of the minds of young people. I'm going to come to Karen-Ruth next, because it's a similar vein, but Tanya obviously was sort of looking more at the secondary school age. You deal with the primary school age, but you did something similar with the Microbit Do Your Bit program. And for young people who are not familiar with the Microbit, it's a little small microcontroller. They're fairly inexpensive, and they can do a lot. But they run a program called Do Your Bit, which is a similar vein in that it's about helping the environment, or helping. It's actually based on the UN sustainability goals. But you did some stuff with that, Karen-Ruth, didn't you, under the Do Your Bit?
Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with the microbits. We tied it into the Do Your Bit program. It's all beautifully presented on the microbit website. So they had to use the microbits to help some element of nature. So for example, we were making them light up with small LED lights to show the turtles the way back to the sea because bright lights were too bright. So it was just a little hook just to get them interested. They liked the idea of doing something with this little computer. So there was a turtle one, there was a fishing nets to stop the bigger sort of dolphins and things getting stuck in the fishing nets, so you can make the fishing nets light up when it gets dark so that they don't accidentally bump into them. So they were just little ideas to show them that actually you can actually program something to do something that makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'll go to Tony next. You run a charity called Dress Code, and you do a hackathon as part of that. And I believe one of the things that you do is you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the groups create a website that promotes green energy. Is that correct?
So it can be anything. So basically, we would run a hackathon. We typically invite 6 secondary schools, and 5 of those secondary schools would be S1 or S2 pupils. And the other secondary school, one of them would be 10 senior pupils who would come and be paired and mentored up with each of their schools, each of the other teams from the schools. So we'd break them into smaller teams, so teams of 4. Our last hackathon we ran was at the University of Glasgow in collaboration with Scottish Power, but our platinum sponsor is JP Morgan. And yeah, basically we can tailor it around anything. You kind of touched on that at the start, and that's what's I think really exciting about computing. You can apply it to any problem, like any solution. It's so exciting. So that solution, because it was Scottish Power, we ran it with a green technology theme, but we have also ran one that we've done at Scottish Parliament, and it was tailored to a report that was coming out in STEM, but we've also done one at Sky and so on. So it can be really tailored, it's really flexible. But yeah, it's the same sort of scenario of giving them a problem, a real life problem, and then getting them to create something with coding, specifically getting them coding to raise awareness and again show them that links and everything what everybody's already says, the links and the power that technology can actually enhance, as opposed to just, like Tanya says, just consuming it. It's like making solutions for the world, which is amazing. And I think computing's really well set in compared to other subjects, but I'm obviously going to say I've been a computing teacher, that, you know, any kids nowadays could just sit even with their phone or in their classroom or wherever and create something and get it out there to the world and actually make a difference. And I think that's amazing. That's so empowering. And it's really trying to get that message to kids in the hackathon, particularly girls, of course, that that they've got that power at their fingertips, and it's an amazing career and sector to be in. So yeah, we definitely try and encourage the same sort of messages as well in the hackathons.
Yeah, no, that absolutely, that's brilliant. And Amanda, I'm gonna come to you last because yours is slightly different, and this is you didn't actually, I don't think you meant to make this point in what you sent me, but I thought it was a really good point, so I'm going to use it. So I mentioned earlier, I came at this from sort of a tech for good, creating a social benefit angle, but actually you can use you can create a community within your school or your organization. And you talked about you come from an area with a lot of migrants, and English is not the first language for many of them. And one of them, you had a particular girl who was interested, who was French in joining, but English, as I say, maybe wasn't her strongest skill at the moment.
She didn't actually speak a word of English when she joined the school. So yeah, that was how we used Scratch, and obviously translate button, so that way she was at least able to take part in something. Because just that particular time, the school obviously didn't have enough support teachers, basically. So this poor kid has been dumped not only from another country, but dumped into this school where she doesn't understand a word of absolutely what anybody's saying, yet we managed to find a little bit of commonality there for them. So that was probably, yeah, it's a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good segue into, and I've just realized I've gone a bit out of order of the the Jamboard, but I'm going to bring it back on track now, because I think that's a good segue into the next theme that we're going to chat about, which is collaboration. And the way I came at this was collaboration amongst young people, but also collaboration between, say, industry and the projects that not only Digital Extra Fund support, but any tech club. So it could be positive peer pressure. It could be role models from industry, but also older pupils. You know, Tony mentioned this earlier. She had some senior pupils that would help out with some of the younger pupils. The Young STEM Leader program is, if you're not familiar with it, it's ran out of CERC. It's a great way for young people who are helping out in STEM areas with other young people get recognition for what the work that they do, because they have SCQF points with that. So I'm going to come to Tony for you first, because you did sort of talk about this a bit earlier. You've obviously got the hackathons where you've got the older pupils helping the younger pupils. You also said that you have posters that feature actual real pupils, because one of the things that you wanted to do was to communicate that you can come from Scotland and you can get a successful career in tech. And so you used actual pupils from Scottish schools in your posters. And then you also mentioned a little bit about Young STEM Leader, and I already sort of chatted about that there, but if you had anything to add, I'd love to hear more about both of those ideas that you had.
Yeah, so with the clubs, I suppose to give you a bit of background, the reason that dress code club started was there was hardly any girls picking subject when I started working at the school I was at, and then so yeah, it just was really about trying to address that. But then I realised through lots of reading research it's a problem that everybody's really facing, but then we seem to have got like a really good culture and community within our school using this dress code model, and part of the model is that it's also Young STEM Leader Award accredited, so any senior pupil who runs a dress code club can also get their Young STEM Leader Award, which is amazing. So we've got that partnership as well, and it really was that creating the culture and community, and then realised that actually we could like help other teachers. You know, there's no cost ever from dress code, and everything we do is absolutely free. But then also speaking to teachers as pupils as well, like trying to sell the subject and how exciting it is. But a lot of the time you're like, you know, you could work for JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, like all these great companies, and kids are just like no idea, like, and understandably, because if you mention Google or Microsoft, they've kind of got an inkling, but if you mention like BGSS or any company, a lot of the time they have no idea what that is or what they do or why should they care, really. And you can throw the little things of like, you know, you make great money, you could travel, but that could be applied to any job, really. So it's how do you make computing stand out? And so what we realised as well was we got these posters up on the wall, and a lot of the time as well, you know, we've got Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper and the likes, but then also having all these other people who are currently in the tech sector. But a lot of the time as game, they're just like, but why do I care? Because it would say like the company they're with. But then when we started to push and apply where they're from in those stories, so for example, someone at Sky is from Midlothian, and that's where I'm from, and it's a rough area, Mayfield. Well, it was back when I was there, but when we applied that actual local story of this person now works at Sky and they love their job and look what they're doing now, but it's kind of given it like a local context. And then furthermore, in our school, when we were doing dress codes with one of our clubs, we realised a lot of the time that the younger kids really relate to the older pupils. And I'm sure, again, everybody knows, like, as soon as you're a teacher, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're like 100-year-old in their eye. But for pupils, people who they really look up to as older pupils, and they see them as cool, or you know, like whatever. So what we started to do was get pupils in a cartoon style, and it says, I choose computing science, along with a quote of their reasons why. And there's some amazing quotes, but because they're in the local context, it really seemed to just kind of snowball. And again, like, people wanted to be on the board, and they wanted to compute, and they wanted to, you know, and it's not a single answer, like get a poster and you'll get like all these kids in, but it was definitely a way that we felt that created a community and a culture within that local context. And we've done posters for like England schools and all this as well. But yeah, I think it's just that thread of one of the threads as well that you're talking about that seems to be really relevant in the other things that we're doing as well.
Yeah, I know last year, you know, Maha and I, one of the grant recipients was a primary school in Glasgow, and in the evaluation at the end, he specifically highlighted that, you know, the sort of P6, P7 pupils that went down and sort of talked about the coding club and encouraged the sort of P3, P4 pupils to join, that he had feedback that that actually made a difference. That seeing girls, and it was girls that in P6, P7 that went down, that they actually saw that these older girls in the school were doing it, and that encouraged them to do it. So now I correct me if I'm wrong, Tony. I think it was one of the very first conversations that when we first met. But I think you also highlighted to me that a lone female girl joining a code club is a challenge. But if you can incentivize or get them to bring a friend or a couple friends, that you found success in doing that as well, almost by incentivizing them to bring friends along. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that idea actually stemmed from I moved house and I joined a running club, but I didn't really know anybody in the area. So I had to beg a friend to come with me. And I mean, I'm in my 30s, like I should be able to go to a club and run, like, but I still had that feeling of like, oh no, I need a friend. And then I was like, actually, like that feeling's never left. And I don't think that that's a female thing. I think everybody feels that all through life. But then it was really occurred to me that actually girls in a young age, you know, it's amplified and it's a challenging time enough being 12 and being in school. And and I thought actually I felt like I needed someone, so let's try and do that. So we really tried to do that thing of bring a friend, bring lunch, like, you know, we'd buy cookies, like anything. And a lot of the time as well, I think there's research done by UCAS who say that particular age and stage, the reasons people pick subjects, and one of them, of course, is like, do they like your teacher? Like, that unfortunately, I think is sometimes really difficult. But that's a real area when in Scotland when people pick their subjects that age. So what we've tried to do as well is just bring lunch, just come along, like have a chat. Wasn't about coding, it was just about getting girls in the room and having that connection and the relationships, and again positive role models, but also having the senior pupils there again saying like, look how much they love this subject and so on. So it's definitely something that we tried, and it was something that was part of our model, and we just kept that going throughout as well, just little ways to try and encourage other girls to bring friends. And it was really nice as well, I think, to see them what happened, because we ran it over a long time, like about 10 years, we saw those young girls then become the mentors. And you know, it was just lovely, and it was just this model that just continued to work in our school. So it was great, and it's definitely something we found, and I, again, in my day-to-day life, it's nice to have a friend.
No, and that it reminds me of something that Tanya, you mentioned as well, something that you're using now, that you call paired programming, where you're actually, you know, allowing them to code together. Not allowing, that's not the right word. You're encouraging them to code together, which, you know, it helps break down barriers, but also it breaks down stereotypes that, you know, the 90s, you know, I grew up in the 90s, that you when you got into IT, you went down the basement, you sat by yourself in front of a computer. It's not like that. It's certainly not now. It wasn't really then, but it's certainly not now. So what can you tell us a little bit more about that your strategy?
Absolutely. I've become obsessed with pair programming recently. So it's something I've only started the last few months. But it kind of came from, like you just said, Craig, about a lot of these stereotypes of, oh, coding sitting by yourself, you don't talk to anybody, it's not problem solving, it's not creative, and just trying to put a twist on that. So I'd come across pair programming as a way. So just to give like background for anyone who doesn't know, so the whole idea is you get two students and there's two roles they can play. So there's the driver and there's the navigator. So the driver is the person with their hands on the keyboard and the mouse, and they're in control of the computer, they're doing the coding, while the navigator is sitting beside them. They're keeping an eye on what the coder or the driver is doing and thinking about like the big picture. So thinking ahead on what they need to do next, maybe providing some support and help for the driver. So I usually do that for about 10-15 minutes, and then halfway between that I get them to swap roles, so they're both getting a chance to code and actually start typing in themselves. But the confidence in my classes that I've seen has just been amazing. Like, we've been doing web development, which is a lot of typing and a lot of spelling, and it doesn't always tell you when you've typed things wrong, and it's really tricky and frustrating. So having someone that you can work with, even just for like part of the lesson, has really boosted their confidence. And then it means that when they go to working independently, they're a lot more confident to ask each other for help or ask for ideas, instead of coming straight to me as soon as they see something that isn't working. So they're starting to build confidence in themselves, which I have loved. But also just like that collaboration and community in the classroom, especially in like my S1 classes who are still kind of getting to know each other, having them pair up together, they've just had a chance to speak to each other in class without really needing a reason to, and then you've seen their friendships grow as well, which I've absolutely loved seeing. But yeah, no, it's been amazing. I would recommend it to anybody for anything.
No, that sounds good. And actually, Amanda, I'll come to you next then, because you wrote about something similar, but you took it again a slightly different turn on it. You said that you proactively tried to pair up boys and girls, and I'm assuming it was at the primary level. Was it? It was a primary school level?
Yes.
And you said, and I'll let you chat as but you said, because I wanted to get this word in there, that when you first suggested it, they just looked at you with pure horror. But you found that as they got used to it and you normalized it, you actually saw some benefits. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was, ooh, boys, ooh, girls, I'm not working with them. But for me, that was all part of my PhD research. I went out into schools, I taught kids how to make games. They were working in pairs, and it was a case of, at first they were, the teacher had paired them up, so it was boy pairs, girl pairs, and then I thought, let's try mix this up a little bit, and that's when it all started. But the results showed that boy-girl pairs produced far better results than, single boy and girl pairs. It worked a lot better. Girls more designery, boys focused on the programming, whereas if you had boy-girl pairing, once they get used to it, and again, as you said, Kate, it's all about normalising working together. Boys and girls, it should be normal for them to work together. And I did throw a fit once at a game jam event when a teacher praised a boy for working with a team of girls. I was ready for some action there. That's not what we do. That should be normal, that should be something from a very early age we should be encouraging, rather than, just saying, right, go work with your pals, which is nice. But, you should have that experience. And as I say, I found it actually worked really well once they got over the initial horror of it. It was good, and they got on with each other. And again, it's that confidence thing where they then start talking to each other and getting things done. And that's again the kind of purpose. Although the game jam, it was all teams of 4, but it's trying to get the mixed teams as well, because again, it's all about normalizing these things. It should be made, when you go out into the workplace, generally, there's a mix. I've got a very mixed staff room here. We've got a good balance in our staff room. And it is, although we're classy, but it's just trying to make these things normal, that it's fine, to work with the boys, fine to work with the girls.
It's not difficult to see how this relates to industry, because what Tanya was saying there about the driver and the navigator, like there's absolutely a manager and a team of developers in industry. It's not that hard. And evidence, anyone can go Google this, but evidence shows that diverse teams perform better. The classic example is when Apple came out with the health app for their Apple Watch, and they completely forgot that women have menstrual cycles and put nothing in the watch that related to that, and so immediately half the population was thinking that this thing was not useful, and that's because they had no female developers working on the project. So there's lots of benefits to working in a diverse group, and as you say, we need to normalize that from the beginning. Now, the other part of collaboration I want to jump to, and I'll come to you first, Karen-Ruth, although Tanya, I know you've got some great examples, and probably all of you do, but one of the things that we try and encourage is collaboration and engagement with industry to help bring context to the projects that are being supported. And Karen-Ruth, as a rural primary school, one might suggest that you would have difficulty engaging with industry, but actually you didn't. You had some fantastic talks, and I'm sure it was because you're a very proactive teacher. But how did you get someone from the games industry, someone from a large tech company that talks about cybersecurity, someone from the space industry, and I can't remember your fourth speaker, apologies. How did you get them to come talk to your school?
Yeah, I mean, this was on the back of COVID as well. So we actually weren't allowed to have visitors coming into the school at the time, which actually worked in our favour. So we live about half an hour's drive north of Dundee. Dundee is actually the kind of like a cyber capital, particularly for the games industry. And it turns out for the space industry as well. So I used Digital Extra, gave me a few links, which were really helpful. I used Future for Schools, which is a good forum for connecting with industry. And some of the developing young workforce connections as well worked really well. So we did live link ups through Teams, because at the time, nobody was allowed into the schools. Amanda came and spoke on the games industry as well. So it was really nice to be able to give a real life examples. They were fairly short and sweet. It was really like, talk us through your role within the company, talk us through how that actually looks, show us some of the things that you were doing. So it was really just good for the children, particularly to see a real life example. And in our case, a real life example of companies that were within the locality. They were half an hour's drive away within Dundee. So yeah, it was just digital connections, digital extra, future for schools, developing the young workforce, and just connecting using social media.
Yeah, I mean, I don't be afraid to ask is what I always tell schools. You know, what's the worst that's going to happen? They don't call you back. You know, there's also well, there's loads of other resources on our website. I won't try and list them off now, but if you go to our website, there's loads of different resources on how to connect with industry. Also, don't underestimate your parent body as well. Or, you know, I appreciate not everyone on the call might be in a school, but you can always sort of put the word out into your parent body. Does anyone work in the tech industry? And I want to move forward because we're losing time here a bit, but I did want to highlight very quickly that call that I joined the Heart of Midlothian Football Club with Tanya. There was a particular UX designer, user experience designer from Sky, who really took the time to go through the app design, and she did an amazing job. And I remember her pointing out like things I didn't even know about, like usually the close button or the minimize button is in the same place in every app, and so that, you know, instinctively we as users know that, and if you don't put your button there, you can actually really like mess with people's heads. So, you know, but as a young person or just anybody really, you probably don't realize that. So she was pointing out these things that was really, really interesting. So right, I'm going to jump to the next topic, which is creativity. And it's fairly straightforward, but I kind of just want to hear what everybody has to say. I'm going to go back to you, Karen-Ruth, because Maha and I had the opportunity to come up and visit you last year, and we saw some of the activities in person. Excuse me. Maha actually got to visit twice. Some of the things, I'm just going to list them, and then you can explain. There was the Vexco Parade, there was Strictly Come Dashing, and there was the microbit coin flipping robots. I mean, how we don't need the tech side, but how did the creative elements of that engage your girls?
So I had a club of 25 primary 4 to primary 7 girls, and we were just having fun. So with the digital extra funding, we got some Dash and Dot robots. They're completely captivated by the cute dances and movements you could do, which you can then code with block coding, which looks just like Scratch. So I just thought, you know, Strictly was big at the time on telly. It was running up to the Christmas show. I thought, let's do a Christmas competition with a coded robot that has to dance. So they chose the Christmas music, they coded the moves, and we made it just a wee Strictly competition. So that was just a little bit of fun, but they loved it. And they loved making the costumes to go on the robots as well. The coin flipping robot was a microbit robot with sensors and motor arms. Again, it was coded so that it could put a hand up and tip a coin over and throw it over its head. And they had as much fun making the costumes for the robot as they did actually doing the coding. The Vexco Parade, we built, it's like a Technics Lego kind of kit. You build it with a Vexco kit, make a hat on the robot, and then you had to navigate it, code it through a maze. So it was just a way of connecting with the creative side, getting coding in there, and just having a bit of fun with it. But they absolutely loved it. You've never seen them be so competitive, I tell you. They loved it.
Well, I know Maha afterwards was absolutely buzzing, especially the Strictly Come Dashing, where you know, it was Christmas themed, obviously, but they did sort of a dance off with the Dash and Dot robots, which was
I was the
brilliant.
Simon Cowell judge of the judges.
I can see that. No, I'm just kidding. And Tanya, apologies, because my note here for you is you had a UI UX designer talking about creativity, so I totally stole your thunder a minute ago. But do you have any other examples that where you used creativity to engage young people in your projects?
Yeah, I mean, that story is my favorite because after those conversations, it just totally blew everybody's mind that it was somebody's job to think about the design and the layout of a mobile app, because up until that point, I think they had this thought in their head that working in tech was just coding and just implementing the product. They hadn't thought about what else happens in that process. So they were mind blown to think that their job could be designing how an app looks. The other one that sticks with me is we got Elena Hodge in, who I can't for the life of me remember the name of her game studio, but she's just she's about to launch one of her games, I'm pretty sure, and she came in to show us the prototype she was working on and how she had to decide where each tree in the forest had to go, and think about how that would impact like the player's movement through the trees and what would be frustrating and how many trees were too many trees. And just seeing it from that detailed a view, I think was incredible. So that was for our Gaming for Good club at Hearts. So it was a similar kind of feeling as the Create an App to Save the World, except they were making video games that kind of raised awareness about a problem in the world. And it really got them thinking about not just the programming side, but everything else of how the user interacts with what they've made and how they can make that better, and how they make the game more enjoyable as well. But those two have stuck with me. They've been fantastic talks. Oh, I lied. There was one more. I'm sorry. There was also Lucy Holland. So she does a lot of work with Tinderbox, and she creates music, composes music for video games. So she came along and she spoke to us about how she'd meet with the games designer and developer and talk about the mood they wanted the player to feel when they were at certain parts of the game, and how she would have to then think about how the music would show that and how to put all that emotion in some tunes that she was playing and composing, which was incredible. Again, another area of making a game that you just don't think about. You don't think about the sound effects and how that adds to the whole vibe of what's going on in the game. They were all incredible.
Yeah, that reminds me of an example Maha and I were talking about just today, actually. The Sphero Indies, if you ever use them, they're like little cars that drive over a colored mat, and when it hits a color, it makes a beep. But you can set the note, I guess, or the tone of the beep, and you could space the mats out at intervals, so you could actually play like 80s music. You could code it, but you weren't on a screen. It's just a car driving over a mat. So just different ways that you can involve creativity, whether that's designing hats or designing a code to a dance, or the examples that Tanya just gave there. Tony, we'll come back to the dress code hackathon. You made a note. I'm not going to talk so much about the hackathon, but you made a note, and Amanda, actually, you made a similar point as well, that you don't have to, like, you have to give young people the basics of when you're teaching them how to do coding or whatever you're teaching them. But then there's a point where you can kind of just let them do what interests them. And that's where you start to see that magic that I think Tony was referring to earlier. So what is it that you meant when you said allow people to just create what interests them?
Yeah, so that kind of is just everything. That was the way that we taught at St. Kitts as well. So and our uptake was massive, like, and still is massive. But it was all very much about giving the pupils autonomy and letting them do what they want. So we didn't do worksheets, we didn't do workbooks, we just threw it all away. And it was very much kind of taking a step back. And also, I suppose one thing we haven't mentioned is like the language. So for example, a lot of the time in the computing curriculum, everybody does games design. But you can see girls just switching off, like, don't play games. So we kind of changed that to like games animation or storytelling. And a simple thing, but like then you can see that like girls, just that reaction was a bit different when we introduced this topic. And then throughout everything that we've done, so the dress code club, the competitions, our general teaching really was about finding the commonalities in games. So like every game usually has a character, so does stories, so does animations, like they'll have a background and so on. There's actually lots that are in common, and we would teach kids how to do particular things. And then like that, it was just away you go. So one thing, like, it's not like teaching everybody to use Pong, for example. It is literally like, right, you're going to have a character, create your own character. Saying that, though, I know it makes it sound like really easy and flippant, but I really know how hard it is, because I've had like 11 first year classes on my timetable, and you only see them one period a week, and it does get really difficult for a teacher, because you've got to remember it gets to a point that everybody goes so far ahead at different paces and stages that you kind of have to remind yourself, like, what is that person doing and so on. However, I think the benefits outweigh that. And again, it was that role model thing. We would get seniors in to help, and the kids loved it. And I think it's the ownership. It's theirs. It's not, here you go, follow this worksheet, do this task. And that's one theme and one, I suppose, like part of the culture that we embedded in our not only classroom practice, but our dress code clubs or dress code online competitions. It is, for example, like create a Halloween like thing using code. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever you want though. And it's really just letting the kids have autonomy and again, like finding their passion. And it's really, I always kind of saw it as my job to support them in making something, but it's not my job to tell them what they're making. And it's just supporting them, I suppose, and helping them get to that point. And it's amazing. And I think anybody who has obviously coded, you experience that ups and downs of like, oh my goodness, I hate this, it's so hard. But then that moment of sheer joy when it works and you've got something proud and you show people, it is just amazing. And that's, again, it was just the culture that we embedded throughout dress code and our classroom practice as well. But yeah, just let the kids do what they want. And I think that goes, again, it's a thing through life. If you get to do something that you enjoy, then you're more likely to be passionate about it, I think, and want to do it and eager to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Amanda, I'll come to you because you actually said you want to make sure that you're not just programming oriented, but you involved other elements such as designing things and magic tricks, which was interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember seeing on Twitter you programmed a microbit to play the Star Wars theme as well. Did you not?
Yes, I did. Yeah, well, I like to try different things. That's what being creative is all about, after all. I've done things before, like so I've got beads, and we've did binary key rings, so had a lot of accessories. Kids went away, made key rings for their parents, 2 initials on it, but obviously in binary. But it was good, then they could go and explain to their parents things like the makey as well. That's just, yeah, amazing for kind of making a lot of noise out of everyday objects, basically, and testing as well. I've actually made that into a science lesson as well, so you experiment and see, well, you know, does this, what conducts electricity and what doesn't. The microbit I absolutely love for the music. That is amazing. And yes, I did watch a 10-year-old make that Star Wars in order for me to learn, because I don't know anything about music. So I learned. I went and I actually spoke at the time to my daughter's music teacher, and in return for me teaching him a wee bit about game design, he taught me a wee bit of music. So things like that. And it's just, yeah, again, it's getting them to see that there is a whole range of stuff out there, and then even taking away from, you know, the actual computers, things like making the beads and the magic tricks as well. So I taught bunch of 9-year-olds about algorithms through a simple magic trick, 4 aces basically. But through that you can actually work through step by step, and you can show them what an algorithm is. It was something that I'd seen, you've probably seen Flummox Learning, Jodie Gregg. Yeah, he's amazing. His stuff is amazing. So that was something that I learned from him, seeing him at a conference. The kids absolutely loved it, and they actually got it. The 9-year-olds actually got it quicker than one of my college classes that year. They could just see, you know, their little brains, the logic and that. So yeah, things like that. It's just taking it outside. You know, we don't need to be on the computer all the time, constantly. There are other things, you know, the unplugged activities that you can do, and it just gets them thinking a little bit more.
Yeah, we supported Jody one year. Actually, it was he did a partnership project with Hertz when Tanya was there. So I know Jody, and yeah, it's crazy because you know what he's doing isn't maybe like magic in the traditional sense, but it because it's all like kind of based on numbers and science, but it feels like magic. It's so cool. So if anyone hasn't ever heard of Jody Gregg, just give him a quick Google, or his company's called Flummox. So that's sort of that. I'm going to tie a bow on collaboration, community, and creativity. That's what I call the 3 big C's, because the last one, competition, I call that the little c, and I'll talk about why in a minute. But I want to put a bow on those 3 topics by paraphrasing something that Karen-Ruth and I talked about when Maha and I were there. That, you know, I've caught myself even on this call saying things like young people instead of, you know, girls and young women, because these topics, these strategies, let's call them, these themes, they're great at getting girls involved in tech, but it's not to the detriment of getting boys uninterested in tech. You're not going to lose boys by implementing some of these ideas. All you're going to do is make your project more inclusive, and that at the end of the day is what we're trying to do. So But those are the three big C's. And for a long time, when I would visit projects or I would visit grant recipients, people would tell me, you know, collaboration over competition. Even before I was at Digital Extra Fund, you know, I'm working in other STEM organizations, collaboration over competition. Girls don't like competition. And I would go to competitions and I would see all girls teams. And the only reason they were there is because they wanted to show all the boys that they were better than them. And what I was being told with what I was seeing was not working. Something wasn't right there. And what I realized is what I said earlier. There is no silver bullet. So you as the educator, you as the activity deliverer, you as the teacher, you need to know you need to know who you are. Sorry, you need to know who's taking part. And if competition is a motivator for a specific group of girls, by all means, like, you can apply to Digital Extra Fund and you can use that as a motivator, and you can get the kit for any number of activities. And we're going to talk about them a bit more in a minute. But yeah, so I call it little C because in some circles, competition is almost viewed as like a dirty word when it comes to engaging girls in tech. But like I said, every competition I've ever been to, there's been an all girls team. So I'll run through these quickly. Tanya, you've taken part in Apps for Good. Karen-Ruth, you mentioned a Vex Go competition and Strictly Come Dashing, which was sort of your own design. Amanda, you run a mini game jam, and Tony, you have a hackathon. So Amanda, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your mini game jam that you run?
So the mini game jam is something, just an idea that I came up with for primary 7 pupils, and it was all about transitioning to secondary school. The initial idea was you would have all the primaries meet together at the secondary school. They would be put into teams of 4, you know, 2 from one school, 2 from another, put into teams of 4. They would get a day to make a game based on worldwide global game jam, and that was it. It's kind of a grown different ways now, obviously, because of just the way things have went over the past few years. And some schools have only sent teams of boys because they thought, well, it's a competition, therefore, you know. And my sort of golden rule for schools taking part is you got to send the full class. This is not, you don't exclude anyone, you send the full class. That way they all get the experience, whether the girls like it or not, whether the boys like it or not. It's about giving everybody the chance to participate in this, and they will all be put into teams. And sometimes, yeah, I'll normally leave that to the schools because they know that they're a bit better informed than me. But that's kind of the way that I've sort of dealt with things before. I just find that I've had to force the schools in a way to actually say, well, you know, everybody comes or no one, you can't exclude, basically.
And if anyone wanted to learn more about your game jam, is there a website or a social media tag that they can go to?
Minigamejam.org, and I've got a Twitter account as well.
Brilliant. Well, we can post that up later. Sorry, not Tanya. Tony, there's some similarities there maybe with the hackathons that you run. In the sort of, we've got about 10 minutes left, which is enough time, but do you want to give a wee plug for the dress code hackathons, and while you're at, maybe a wee plug for Stacks as well?
Yeah, so dress code hackathons again, it's pretty much obviously like since COVID, it then just like fell because we couldn't do face-to-face, and but then because of COVID we started to do our online competitions. So we've got 2 kind of competitions, I suppose, annual online competitions that we do every year. We have got like a summer of code competition, like a festive competition at Christmas, Halloween, and then we also do a cyber advent calendar as well. But what's quite nice about that as well, we never really intended them to become what they've become, but they now have became part of like the curriculum, I suppose, for a lot of schools. We get emails all the time going like, are you running this? Are you definitely doing this? Which I love, like, and it's so nice to know that like it's helping people enhance on, again, making that curriculum maybe a bit more exciting, or again giving the creativity and so on, but also having the opportunity of like a reward, like a actual prize. So they're open to everybody, primary all the way up to secondary, because we know that you know, it starts earlier than secondary. And then with the hackathons as well, really if any schools just want one. So what we used to do was we would kind of target schools, but now we just kind of open up and wait for a school to sort of say like, oh, they want a hackathon. Usually we go with people who are running dress code clubs anyway, and because then it's a nice, we always like to go, but then what, you know. So if you're running a club then you have those girls to then become come to the actual event, but then they might end up be running a club. So for example, St Ninians in East Wren, the girls who mentored the Scottish Power Hackathon that we done at the University of Glasgow, they actually run the dress code club at St Ninians. So again, it was that kind of next step, and it's always that kind of bridging the gap between industry and education that I always focus on. But yeah, so it's really just if anybody wants a hand, like I'm more than happy. We've got lots of lessons that I've learned the hard way at the school, but also having that ability and that amazing ability to kind of reach out to schools and be like, or you're struggling with uptaking girls, like let's run a whole girl hackathon. And I know, like you mentioned there, I think if we left it to just let's leave it open to any pupils, then we probably would get more boys than girls. But specifically, that's why it's always been that target of it's going to be girls only, but also playing on that factor that not every girl gets the opportunity to study computing science at their school. Not every girl, if they do want to study, they might be the only girl. So it's getting them in a room with other girls from other schools to make them realise, actually, look at all these girls having a great time and I'm loving it as well. So, you know, it's a really difficult to solve problem, like you say, and there's no silver bullet, but we're trying to play our part. And then the other thing I suppose we've got going on is the awards. So we've got 3 awards for every secondary school in Scotland for best female in computing science, and we've also got best male pupils coming out as well. So the Turin Award and the Hopper Award, and we've also got I didn't want to announce it, but I'll slowly announce it. But we're going to be announcing we've got certificates for Hopper and Turin Awards coming out from nursery all the way up to P7. Again, just that full pipeline of talent that we then want to see, because then, you know, when they go to university, then they can get the chance of winning the software award that Scotland does. So again, it's just kind of, again, bridging that gap. But yeah, and I think it's just that freedom. We're very flexible. It's literally just 3 of us who run it, and we're, you know, so if anybody wants a crazy idea and thinks I would really like a hand doing this, like let us know, and we'll if it fits, we'll do it. Most of the time we'll say yes. But yeah, I think that's what we need. The world needs more wild ideas to try and solve this. So yeah, happy to help where I can.
Cool. And can you describe Stacks in 1 minute or less? Yeah,
sorry. So yeah, Stacks, Scottish Teachers Advancing Computing Science. It is basically a one-stop shop of all things computing science, not STEM, just computing. So you'll find all videos, like research papers, everything, but then on the website, and just we'll pick up and play materials. But additionally to that, like we are 2 computing science teachers who've lived and breathed it and had huge success in our school. So it's really about coming out to schools and finding out their challenges and trying to support them with that. It's definitely not going, look what we did, apply this and you'll be fine, because we know that that's not how it is. It's really working with teachers as a big community of teachers to try and help each other, because we're not competing, we're all facing the same challenges, and it's really to just try and speed that up and see the difference on a national level if possible. So yeah, big goals, but we've got to try.
Absolutely. Tanya, I haven't really asked you, I know you were involved with Apps for Good for many years, but are you currently running any competitions in your current school?
We're not currently doing Apps for Good. No, I've got some of our code clubs are currently going into the AstroPi competitions that are live just now. So it's all about, it's actually really cool. Everyone will get to send their code up to space, and they get a little certificate to say what time their code actually ran up in space, which I'm so excited to see. And then I think there's more competitions in a more detailed level, which we'll need to look into a bit more. But I would definitely recommend Apps for Good for anyone who is looking. They've started to expand it a lot. They've got all the resources online for free, and they've not just got apps, but they've also started looking at machine learning and climate action as well, which all sound amazing. And then an amazing hook of, if you get through to the finals, you get to go down to London and meet some really cool companies like Spotify and Lego and pitch your ideas to these people, and spend a day meeting other schools who've done the competition. And yeah, the competition final day is so much fun. Definitely worth a look for anyone in primary or secondary.
And they finally have a community manager based in Glasgow now, actually, as well. So we have they've kind of, like Maha and I, they've kind of adopted the remote working model. And like I said, yeah, so they have someone in Glasgow. So if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to them. So Karen-Ruth, you ran the VexGo competition. If anyone's not familiar with Vex Go, you can just do a quick Google of it. But basically, there's different. It's just Vex actually, and then there's different levels of which Vex Go is one of which. It's at the primary level. As it gets up and up in the upper levels, it kind of think of like Meccano on steroids almost. As you get up, and you actually have robot battles, although you don't fight the robots, but you compete in a ring against another robot to complete challenges. But the Vex Go level, which is more the primary level, as Karen-Ruth mentioned, it's sort of like Technique or Technic, I don't know how to pronounce it, which is like the Lego model. Did you want to mention anything about the Vex Go or the Strictly Come Dashing or any other competitions while we as sort of the last
Yeah,
point?
my girls are very competitive. It's almost like aggressively so. Yeah, I mean, the Vex Go competition was more of an in-house thing, so it wasn't as competitive because we were just working through projects as a group, but they were basically getting points and then they got the certificates. So there was a nice kind of structure to support them with the certificates at the end. We are working towards a Vex IQ competition. As part of the funding I got from the grant, we've got funding to buy a second Vex IQ robot, and then we can do the Rise Above competition. So we're working towards that one, which is the kind of the next level up. It's like P7, S1, S2 kind of level. Yeah, so they're very competitive and they love it. There's only so much I can take in terms of competitive competition. I can probably only manage one or two a year because it's quite exhausting. But they did enjoy it. Yeah.
Cool. And we mentioned it earlier, but I'm just going to put the link in the chat as well. There's Do Your Bit, which is by Microbit as well. And that is, while it is based on the UN sustainability goals, there is a competitive element if you choose to follow that. And the winner, I believe, gets a trip down to London, which it's a global competition. So if you're based outside the UK, that's probably a more exciting prize than if you're based in Scotland. But hey ho, who's going to turn a trip down? So that takes us to the full hour. I'm a little bit disappointed only because I actually had some more points I wanted to make. But Matthew, maybe we will have to save that for the ada.scot festival. Specifically, I wanted to have an all-out debate about all girls programming versus mixed. Well, we did talk a bit about it. I think we all agree mixed is better, but there's also perhaps a place for all-girl activities to maybe get girls who aren't quite sure involved. So you appreciate we're at 5 o'clock, but I wanted to ask Matthew if you could just tell us a little bit more about the ada.scot festival and when it is and what can we expect?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so the Ada Scotland Festival, or ada.scot, nice and easy web address to remember. We've run 3 times now. So we started in 2020 and we'll run again this year. It happens in October, around about Ada Lovelace Day. It lasts about 2 weeks. That changes from year to year, but around about 2 weeks. And it's a series of curated events that we put on in partnership with companies, universities, other charities, including Dress Code. It's generally a celebration of girls in tech at all kinds of levels. We are under strict instructions not to talk about the challenges and the doom and gloom, so I will not. We all know why we do it. But if you want to get involved, have a look at the website. Anna, who works with me on the festival, I should say the festival was set up with Anna, Tony, and our colleague Ella Taylor-Smith at Edinburgh Napier. Anna has curated a bunch of resources from this year's festival or last year's festival, which I'll paste into the. Oh, Anna's already on the case. I'll paste that into the chat so I don't feel left out. Some resources there that people can access. But yeah, watch out for us this coming October, and please do get involved.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And before we say goodbye, I'd like to thank Tanya and Tony and Karen-Ruth and Amanda for taking the time today to bless us with their insight. And I think if they were in charge of this, we probably wouldn't have a problem. So let's just work towards that. Okay. So thank you all very much. I hope you all enjoyed today's talk. And as Maha said, we will be ending recording shortly and it'll be up on our website, hopefully this week. It's a busy week, but hopefully this week. So thank you very much and have a great day.